Welcome. Everything is Brainhead. Chapter 3, Colin's Gambit. This show is part of the Haha Brainheads universe. Thanks for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe, like, and comment. Just remember to not be an asshole in the comments. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can unlock one extra chapter a month for as little as $5 a month, as well as a bunch more exclusive content. If you're watching this on Patreon, thanks for being a brainhead, you dink. This chapter will include spoilers for the NBC show The Good Place, so if you haven't seen it, you should probably do that first. Okay, so when I knew that I was going to be starting this show, one of the first ideas I had was a simple ranking episode. Take all 52 chapters of The Good Place, rank them in order from best to worst, add some context, and call it a day. But then, because I just can't help myself, I started wondering, what is best and what is worst? Since there's no consensus or standardization to ranking, what value does my opinion hold? We don't know each other in a way where my saying a chapter is the best or the worst would provide any perspective or insight to you. So the question really became, is there a system by which I could rank them in a way that would provide enough context to you as the viewer to walk away with a more nuanced understanding of what I meant when I said a chapter of The Good Place was good or bad, better or worse? My first thought was IMDB. IMDB for me has long been a highly reliable website where I can learn more about what I'm watching, as well as read reviews from the mainstream viewership. A quick glance at IMDb's site not only showed an overall show rating as 8.2 out of 10 from 221,000 reviewers, but also gave a chapter-by-chapter set of ratings. This was great. I thought I could probably use this as a baseline consensus, and instead of ranking each chapter in the show, I could note the IMDb score for each chapter and say whether I thought the rating should be higher or lower based on the things about the chapter that stood out to me. For example, Chapter 6, What We Owe to Each Other. It's rated 7.7 out of 10 on IMDb. In this new context, I thought I could note that this rating seemed a little low to me. It's the first thematic introduction of the cockroach's interconnectedness. It shows Eleanor's continuing capacity for intrinsic accountability, and in some ways sets the tone for Michael's rehabilitation through showing him the simple joys of humanity. I thought I could note that I enjoyed learning in The Good Place, the podcast, that the paperclip bracelet Michael was wearing in the neighborhood meeting was something Eleanor made for him to show him one of those simple joys of human nature, and that the writers considered having him wear it for the remainder of the show. I think it's highly rewatchable after the twist in Chapter 13, and I'd probably say that it could move up about 0.3 points to make it a solid 8 out of 10 for the reasons I listed previously. But I've since unreasonably decided to go full cheaty, so I owe it to you, the viewer, to make sure that the ratings provided in IMDb truly are consensus. If I'm going to respond to them in good faith, I need to be sure that they were aggregated in good faith. Well, that took me down a little bit of a rabbit hole. In the 1980s, a young teenager of a single mom living in Denton, South Manchester named Colin Needham was obsessed with two things: computers and movies. Computers were a new passion for him as a young teen. Quote, for Christmas in 1979, at the age of 12, he received and built his first computer with a Science of Cambridge MK14 kit, close quote. His obsession with movies started at age 5, when he won 2 tickets to the movies through a local coloring contest. An interview with Ability magazine from 2023 shows that the contest was a family affair. He later found out as an adult that after he went to bed the night he finished coloring, his grandma went back and filled in all the lines to assist him, and his mom kept the letter announcing his win. He began keeping a paper diary of the movies he'd seen, but his new computer gave him an idea. By the time he was 13, his mother burst into his room to tell him to get some fresh air as he was, quote, diligently logging the available facts and figures on all the many movies he had seen. He was then a self-confessed binge watcher and could often, on the family's VHS player, watch 6 films in a day, close quote. He notes in an Amazon article from 2023 that his purpose for the database was to, quote, run reports like, how many Alfred Hitchcock films have I seen, close quote. At age 14, he upgraded his computer to a Sharp MZ80K. The film credits database Needham was working on ended up leading him to an early internet discussion board called Usenet, specifically rec.arts.movies. Over time, this morphed into a passion project, not just for himself, but for other users of Usenet, who, quote, collated his personal database with other film information lists, close quote, in the late 1980s. I've seen reference to this happening between 1987 and 1989 when he was around 20 to 22, but I didn't find a credible source for this. I did find an article from Maquota posted in 2006 that cites it as 1989 and had this wonderful screenshot of IMDb from 2006. I kind of miss when the internet looked like that. Anyways, early on in the database's formation, while he was in college, Needham utilized Unix shell scripts to make the database searchable. This, as we can remember from his early teens, was a core tenet of the database's design. Unix was a relatively new innovation. The first version was released in 1971 and, quote, gained significant traction in academic and research institutions as users were encouraged to modify the source code, leading to numerous variations and adaptations, close quote. Needham went on to graduate from the University of Leeds with a bachelor's degree in computer science in 1988 at the age of 21, and then started working for Hewlett-Packard, the company now known for selling printers that can't be used without a subscription fee, but who, at the time, had just released their first computer in 1980. The year Needham started high school. A year later, he married his high school sweetheart, Karen, and a year after that, on October 17, 1990, Needham, quote, wrote and published the first version of the International Movie Database software, close quote. He was still working at HP. This was a passion project for him, as it always had been, but it was unmistakable that this passion project was gaining a life of its own. He now had volunteer site participants from around the world that contributed credit lists, added categories, and importantly, housed the site on volunteer server space. EBSCO notes that, quote, early servers included that of Cardiff University in Wales, where site volunteer Rob Hurdle was a graduate student, close quote. By the time he published IMDB to the internet, might I add, pre-World Wide Web, the database, quote, included details on nearly 10,000 movies and television series, close quote. From its first publication in 1990 to 1993, users had to install the database locally on their home computers, but they could also upload their own data, which led to a self-sustaining model. No longer was it one teenager in his dark room alone, but a community. In 1993, Needham and his wife Karen, who are still together, had their twin daughters, and staggered the babies' feeding schedules with the running times of the newly released film Jurassic Park, while Karen's sister babysat. That year, he also migrated IMDB to the World Wide Web. The World Wide Web, developed by Tim Berners-Lee at the European Organization for Nuclear Research, we don't have time to get into that, or most commonly known by its acronym CERN, was released to the public in April 1993, quote, on a royalty-free basis, making it a free software. By late 1993, there were over 500 known web servers, and World Wide Web accounted for 1% of internet traffic, which seemed a lot in those days. The rest was remote access, email, and file transfer. Not only was Needham's IMDB in the first 500 servers of 1993, it was in the first 100. By 1995, his passion project had expanded so much that it was no longer just a hobby. He, quote, had to choose between closing it down or seeing if they could incorporate it as a business, close quote. They decided to go with the business, launching IMDB commercially in January 1996, bought their first server on a credit card, and, quote, sold their first piece of advertising 2 weeks later and were able to pay off the credit card, close quote. Needham officially quit HP by the summer of 1996 to focus on growing the business. It worked. By the end of 1997, IMDB was, quote, generating more than 18 million visitors a month and had become one of the most popular sites on the web, close quote. As 1997 was wrapping up, Needham received an email from Amazon asking if he would be open to meet with Jeff Bezos. He figured it was about expanding the advertising Amazon had recently started on IMDB and agreed to the meeting. Side note, if you haven't seen CJ the X's video called Bo Burnham versus Jeff Bezos on YouTube, you should. It's great. Anyways, Bezos met with Needham to explain that Amazon was moving from books. Everyone remembers that's how it started, right? Books. To music and movies, and was interested in developing an online video store. By April 24th, 1998, just 5 years after the World Wide Web was introduced to the public, the deal was made, and IMDB and 2 other companies were announced as Amazon's first acquisitions. I found details of the acquisition, which included IMDB, Book Pages, which, quote, was one of the largest online bookstores in the United Kingdom, providing access to all 1.2 million UK books in print, close quote, and Telebook, Germany's #1 online bookstore, with a catalog of nearly 400,000 German-language titles, close quote. The press release includes a statement from Amazon that reads, quote, because of their similar passion for books, the Amazon.com team understands and fully supports IMDb's mission of providing the best possible information to movie lovers, close quote. All 3 companies were purchased in total for approximately $55 million, split between cash and 540,000 shares of common stock in Amazon. Needham stayed on as the CEO of IMDb after the acquisition, and IMDb became an independent subsidiary of Amazon. His passion project was now in the hands of Amazon, due to his positive belief in Bezos' statement from the Amazon press release regarding the transition, that Bezos hoped IMDb would, quote, support Amazon's eventual entry into the online video sales world, close quote. Needham and his wife now live in Filton, which is in Bristol, southwest England. He received an honorary doctorate from the University of Bristol in 2018 and stayed on as IMDb's CEO until January 2025. His net worth isn't publicly available, but every report I've found puts it in the double-digit millions. Wondering if he gives his money away? I couldn't find much proof of it. He sits on some film-related boards and partners with charities to hold fundraisers, but that's about all I could find. He still tracks his movies. He told The Guardian in 2013 he'd seen 8,254 unduplicated films, and then told Amazon in 2023 he'd seen 14,845 unduplicated films. That means if he's still standardly seeing around 660 new films a year, he's just around 17,000 at the time of this filming. Side note, I did look it up and I was right. That's crazy. That's an average of 2 new movies a day. If you're wondering why I've waxed lyrical about Call Needham for the last 10 or so minutes, it's because I'm building to a point. I'm going to tell you now, in a very long and needlessly complex way. What are the themes of Needham's life? Number 1, very early technology adoption. At-home computers, VHS rentals, pre-World Wide Web internet use, a computer science degree, Unix models, working at HP, migration to the World Wide Web, building a community online with folks around the world, an acquisition by Amazon. As hard as it may be to believe that all of this was new not that long ago because we're fighting the inevitable future of an AI takeover while morphing into cyborgs with our tiny, constantly connected supercomputers as we rot our brains on a dead internet and an ad-laden social media hellscape, it was new not that long ago. Call Needham at the time of this recording is not even 60 yet. I'm sure we've all seen that technology adoption bell curve, academically known as Everett Rogers' diffusion of innovations. We don't have time to get into it, but to say that he was an early adopter would be a disservice. He was an innovator, top 2.5%. According to the model, innovators understand the relative advantage of technology, measured in, quote, economics, convenience, satisfaction, and social prestige, close quote. These new technologies for Needham could give him exactly what he wanted, and he immediately saw the relative advantage of adopting them. Number 2, remember, we're doing themes of his life. Number 2, academia. This was a boy who spoke in academia fluently. He not only went to college, but he practically used his learnings from computer science to implement Unix, which was primarily used in academic settings at the time. Hell, getting a computer science degree was a very academic thing to do at the time. Computers were this foreign object, interjecting and interceding and interplaying with the ways in which humanity connected to each other. The World Wide Web, coming out of an academic pursuit, likely provided Needham the credibility he felt made it worthy of his database. His acceptance of the honorary doctorate, staggering his newborn's feeding times to perfectly execute a task, very academic. Put a pin in this one, we're gonna come back to it. Number 3, the power of movies to change lives. The boards he sits on are primarily around providing young children the opportunity to engage critically with film in some way. In almost every interview I could find, he cites Steve Martin in the film Grand Canyon. Quote, that's part of your problem. You haven't seen enough movies. All of life's riddles are answered in the movies, close quote. Several articles talked about how he speaks in hushed tones, as almost in reverence for the ability of movies to inspire, to uplift, to create livelihoods. Put a pin in this, we're also gonna come back to it. This is a guy whose life has been centered around one thing, movies and shows. He accidentally created an ecosystem that is so big it can't be contained, and despite all of it, he still only cares about one thing, movies and shows. It's not often we get to know the face of God. I thought it prudent to know him, to know in what likeness that IMDb and us using it are accidentally being molded into. For a God who only cares about one thing, a lot of things happen by accident. So let's talk about statistics now. As much as I am Chidi, I am also Eleanor. If a cop handcuffs me to a bike rack, there's always something I can gnaw through. Am I a statistician? No. Am I gonna pretend to be one because it's important to my point? Yes. Did you forget that this was a show about the good place? Probably. As you know, one of the major themes of the show is that the point calculations used to determine if humans are good or bad is fundamentally flawed. While life is complicated may be a divorced woman's throw pillow, it's also incredibly accurate. So let's look at the models behind IMDb's site, the ways in which they have accidentally been molded into Needham's likeness, and talk about the unintended consequences of a system too complex for us to change without just hitting that button eraser thingy. Spoiler alert, I won't be ranking the chapters of The Good Place in this. I'm just mulling the ethical ramifications of various soups. Stats. First of all, I hate stats, and not because they're complicated, but because they're often nonsense. Statistics as a practice is predicated on the supposition that missing data can be derived through backwards math to tell a story and make predictions. It's an attempt to answer the big question of uncertainty. But humans are uncertain and erratic and not able to be condensed into a number or a set of numbers that can be plugged into a nice, neat little formula. When we are, sometimes the anomalies and the outliers are discarded and the whole story isn't told. Then the answer to uncertainty is wrong, and decision makers do some wild stuff. Alright, I don't necessarily hate statistics. I just think that their often derivative form is an injustice to the things that may matter. But because they're a number that make other number look weird, statisticians often gloss over what may matter and focus on the story they want to tell. Let's look at two examples. Number one. I kinda already did stats in this video. I told a story of a man who has been watching multiple movies a day and logging them for basically his whole life and took two data points, 8,254 from 2013 and 14,845 from 2023, to find that the average number of movies a year he watches is 660. I validated my data by looking at his IMDb profile to find that my supposition was mostly correct. I had enough data to assume that he would continue the trend he's had his entire life, and I was correct. The parameters by which I calculated that supposition were very narrow, and there wasn't a lot of nuance. The whole story is there. Good stats. Second example. I found a Reddit thread that was talking about stats and why we, look at me, acting like I'm a statistician, should throw out outliers. One example was that if you took a company where 9 people made $10,000 a year and 1 person made $500,000 a year, the average salary would be $59,000 a year if you left that outlier in the dataset. Take it out, and you could confidently say that the average salary at the company is $10,000. Some of the comments agreed, saying that if a company advertised their average salary as $59,000 a year, and then the job offer was for $10,000, it would feel misleading. My response would be, I want to be told that one person makes $500,000 a year and the average of the rest is $10,000. Knowing that one person makes 5,000% more than the rest may impact my interest in the job. Just throwing the outlier out takes away my agency to decide if it's important or not. And I know that I'm likely in the minority of people who think this way. I took a few graduate level statistics and mathematics classes, and I genuinely couldn't stomach standard deviations and probability distributions and theoretic setups. It felt like the Frankenstein's monster of science. Start with the story, end with the data. I know that's reductive, but how many academic papers or news articles do you read where an economist or a statistician or a data scientist says, hey, I had a theory, but the statistical model didn't match the story I wanted to tell. So I just wanted to let you all know that if you're wanting to create a statistical model that shows early intervention, fall prevention for seniors covered by healthcare insurance doesn't work, I'm here to tell you that the math doesn't support that. No, we see the models that do work for the story the statistician or company or government wants to tell, and we're impacted by the outliers on the daily. A young driver who is really safe and never gets pulled over in an accident but then has their car break down on the side of the road for very normal reasons and calls a tow truck, which is a completely reasonable thing to do, sees their car insurance rate increase because the predictive model shows that they don't have enough liquid capital to cover incidental expenses and are likely to cost the insurance company more through extended coverage. That's not fair to that young person who just had a bad day and doesn't ever get pulled over or in an accident, despite what the model says about them. Because the model was built to tell the story of insurance protecting itself, not insurance protecting us. Okay, I'm getting really sidetracked. This is about The Good Place. Well, it's actually about IMDb, but still, back to the point. So, to see if I could use IMDb ratings to speak to my perspectives on each chapter of The Good Place, I needed to make sure that the ratings provided in IMDb truly were consensus. Like I said before, if I'm going to respond to them in good faith, I need to be sure that they were aggregated in good faith. After my rabbit hole that I just dragged all of you through with me, I looked a little bit into the IMDb rating system. At first glance, it seems pretty simple. The top question on the ratings FAQ notes IMDb registered users can give a rating from 1 to 10, and quote, individual ratings are then aggregated and summarized as a single IMDb rating visible on the title's main page, close quote. But then, on the FAQ page, about 5 under the top question, another question caught my eye. What does weighted average mean? Now, this is fun. The answer, quote, IMDB publishes weighted rating averages rather than raw data averages. The simplest way to explain it is although we accept and consider all ratings received by users, not all ratings have the same impact or weight on the final rating. When unusual rating activity is detected, a different weighting calculation may be applied in order to preserve the reliability of our system. To ensure our rating mechanism remains effective, we don't disclose the exact method used to generate the rating. Close quote. I also read under their FAQ question, is your system broken? And buckle up because I'm about to read almost the whole response. Quote, we don't simply calculate the average by adding up all the ratings and dividing the total by the number of ratings. To prevent abuse and minimize attempts to stuff the ballot or otherwise influence the integrity of the rating system, we don't reveal details about how weighted ratings are calculated other than what is already documented. Rest assured, all calculations are applied automatically and there's no human bias in how aggregate ratings are calculated. Statistical considerations aside, there's really no right or wrong rating for a title. You can argue that the rating is reductive or too simplistic, and that's a fair point. The IMDb rating aims to distill and aggregate the opinions of millions of IMDb users around a work of artistic expression into a single number from 1 to 10. So obviously some nuances are lost in the process, but we believe that the rewards outweigh the risks. Close quote. So if IMDb doesn't disclose the exact method for how weight is calculated, how could I learn more? I did some digging and found some articles that I think provide insight. The first, from Medium, published in 2024, notes that it is generally known that they take vote reliability and manipulation attempts into account. Vote reliability, manipulation attempts. These were alluded to in the IMDb FAQ page. They use a different weighting calculation to preserve reliability when unusual rating activity is detected. Okay, so then what makes a vote more reliable? Well, according to both the Medium article and an article that I found from The Ringer, IMDb places more value on regular users, people who submit a lot of ratings. If you consistently rate a lot of titles, your vote is very likely to count more than, say, a non-regular, non-consistent user who doesn't watch or rate a lot of movies and shows, but finds a few really good or bad ones and feels an urge to contribute to the online database because they found it so wonderful or terrible that they just had to rate it. Consistent, regular ratings, and Needham's likeness. But what about manipulation attempts? According to the Medium article, that is when, quote, there is an influx of 1-star or 10-star ratings to artificially raise or lower the score. IMDb can manage extreme voting patterns because it weighs votes considered more reliable higher, close quote. So if you and your friends are not logging every movie and show you have all seen like it's your number one passion in life, and all of you go to see a truly awful movie on opening weekend and all feel the need to rate it, well, that could be counted as a manipulation attempt. Consistent, regular ratings, and Needham's likeness. Now, don't get me wrong. Humans do suck, and we do have a propensity to try to manipulate something wonderful, like a simple volunteer-generated, freely available database, into its most grotesque form because our internet personas are often the worst versions of ourselves. So I understand the need to put protections in place. A Wired article from 2016 notes this problem succinctly. Quote, IMDb voters are tanking indies before they're even released. A handful of under-the-radar movies have seen their IMDb user reviews take a massive, mysterious drop before opening night. Close quote. But why make the protections based on how consistent of a user you are on its platform? We all can't be Carl Needham, obsessively tracking and rating every movie or show we see, and we all don't want to be. An article from Mel magazine from 2016 echoes my concern. Quote, it means that the votes of casual fans are people who are too busy to engage as much, including the busy industry professionals who have better things to do, aren't included in the rating, even if they make a few of them. Close quote. But I thought, after reading all that, let's give the algorithm the benefit of the doubt. Who's not to say that the consistent users aren't a true cross-cutting, intersectional, diverse amalgamation that do tend to, more or less, represent the broad spectrum of viewership? Well, because they aren't. The same article from Mel magazine shows a breakdown of the top movie in the top 250 list, which uses a Bayesian estimate that is likely similar to the weighted averages formula IMDb uses for individual titles. We don't have time to get into it, but the fundamental underpinning of Bayesian estimates is weighted averages based on adding more weight to data with more longitudinal indices, same as the hints we've gotten on the weighted averages formula. At the time of the Mail magazine article, the top movie was Shawshank Redemption, and the breakdown shows that the votes that do count toward the final rating, so not including the outliers that got discarded under the guise of unreliability or manipulation attempts through the lens of how consistently the user is voting. In this breakdown, votes from men between the ages of 18 and 29 outweigh women in the same age bracket more than 5 to 1. And overall, men outweigh women 5.5 to 1. It is clear from this data point and others that it is men who often prioritize consistently rating movies and shows, which in some ways could also be an indicator of positionality as potentially more affluent or at minimum having more free time, aka having the ability to watch more movies, aka more access to technology, more liquidity to pay to watch movies. I think a reasonable conclusion could be that it is young, socioeconomically comfortable men who dominate the votes. Now, is that a bad thing? No, I think it's cool that men are watching movies and sharing their ideas and opinions with others online. Do I think it's equitable? Also no, as we know that young men are likely to have the privilege of time and money in a way that hasn't historically been available to others. But that's not the young men's fault. It's the prioritization of consistent ratings in the weighted average. Young men or white men or men in general are not the inherent problem here. The system by which they are engaging, the grander societal system that provides them the capacity and flexibility to engage more with submitting ratings on movies they've seen, is. And Needham, a young man who benefited from the system either accidentally or purposefully, has perpetrated the system. There is human bias, despite what IMDb says. Needham became God in the shape of Doug Forcett. He saw the key to success, and he decided to stay in the groove of that success, refusing to eat chicken parm in case it cost him points. Except in this extended metaphor, I guess Needham is making everyone else drink their own piss, not him. Anyways, what was IMDb's response when this was brought to light consistently over time by writers and users? Well, in 2023, IMDb removed age and gender demographic breakdowns from user ratings. So before, if I was interested in a movie, I could go to the ratings and use the age, gender, and geographical breakdown to help me interpret if the ratings might be more or less accurate for me, based on my positionality. But now, because the bias of God created unintended consequences, and it was found by the users, it went behind the veil. And my autonomy to interpret the data, the whole point of a database, is slightly more stripped than it was before. Now all I can see is the rating by country. And I know some of you are probably thinking, but they show the unweighted rating. You're right. If you navigate to the title you're interested in, click on the IMDb rating, and scroll all the way down to the bottom of that page, in tiny font, you can find the unweighted mean. Now, because I have my cheaty hat on, I'm immediately curious about this verbiage, because the IMDb FAQ page notes a weighted average, but this is listed as an unweighted mean. Since average and mean aren't always interchangeable, I'm curious if this mean is more of a standard arithmetic mean or more of a harmonic mean. But alas, the trail to look upon the face of God has ended, and I'll never know until I can corner Needham and ask. So why? Why have I done this to you, the few who have stuck with me to the end? Why care about point calculations? I mean, let me just ask that again. Why in a show about The Good Place would I obsess about point calculations? The answer is kind of obvious. In case it isn't, here's why. Because it matters. Because the unintended consequences of a system designed to value those most in the likeness of Needham have very deleterious effects on the professionals who create movies every day. So to go back to IMDb's response to, is the system broken? They're right that there is no right or easy way to collate data from millions of users and distill it into one simple number. But do, as IMDb puts it, the rewards of their current methods outweigh the risks? IMDb is a behemoth. Let me read a quote from Needham himself in 2023 about the far-reaching impact of IMDb. Quote, IMDb is the #1 movie website in the world, with more than 200 million monthly visitors. Our iOS and Android apps have been downloaded hundreds of millions of times, and our social media channels are followed by more than 15 million highly engaged fans. IMDb helps customers around the world discover and decide what to watch, advance their professional careers with our IMDb Pro service, share their passions, grow their businesses, and so much more. We receive nearly 1 million data contributions per week, and our database currently includes more than 14 million titles, 12 12.4 million professionals, and over 1 billion user ratings. Our data helps power essential Amazon businesses and experiences, including Fire TV, Prime Video, X-Ray, and Alexa. Leading companies all over the world, including TikTok and Universal Pictures, license our data, further extending the reach and impact of our data. Close quote. If that data is skewed, if the system used to filter which ratings should have more value than others relies on an implicit bias derived from a singular Englishman who has the time and ability to watch and rate 2 new movies or shows every day, and that bias then morphed over 30 years, then its impact on which movies get watched and which actors get cast and which directors get deals and which screenwriters get funded is all skewed. To butcher a quote from Michael, the system by which we judge movies and shows is so fundamentally flawed and unreasonable that hundreds and millions of movies, shows, and the people who create them have wrongly been condemned to an eternity of torture. And we don't even have time today to get into the IMDb pro of it all, the LinkedIn-like backend for IMDb professionals to be able to network and get discovered. But I believe in your ability to draw the line between what happens when IMDb user ratings, which I reasonably think could be skewed, are a focal point in the portfolios of millions of film and television professionals. Once again, I'm not saying that individuals are the problem, but society is not a monolith, and I don't think it's too much to ask that the user ratings of a website be representative of our diversity. Needless to say, the impacts are far-reaching. Maybe one day I'll go further into this topic, but since I'm not really in that industry, I'm not sure I'm the best voice for it. To wrap this up, Needham is a man worth multiple millions of dollars who has not provided public support or funding to any cause outside of his limited view, the way in which movies can change the lives of young people like it did for him, despite him being an outlier as a technology innovator. He's a man whose orator at his honorary doctoral commencement in 2018 noted about his favorite quote from the movie Grand Canyon, the quote, politically urgent tone in the current but long overdue climate of addressing power and exploitation across a number of industries, close quote. Carl Needham has not addressed his passion project IMDb's power and exploitation across a number of industries. Him being, from what I could read, in all accounts, a better, more adjusted person than a lot of the millionaires and billionaires is not enough to weather the influx of unintended consequences. He is not the blueprint, in the same way Doug Forcett was not the blueprint, though he does have the influence, capital, and ability to shepherd IMDb out of the groove of comfort it's in, even if he's not the CEO anymore. So, what's the answer? To quote Chidi, this kind of thing doesn't have just one answer. There could be 800, there could be 0. Who knows? Anyways, join me next week on Patreon if you're interested in me breaking down the discrepancies between the IMDb weighted and unweighted ratings of each chapter of The Good Place, standardizing the number of IMDb ratings per chapter to rank them in order from highest to lowest, and discussing standard deviations and outliers using data I collected from IMDb. As a reminder, I'm not a statistician. Okay, well, good Bob, I hope we stay in place very now. Thanks for watching, and join us on YouTube by subscribing, or on Patreon for as low as $5 a month. How have you questioned systemic power in unexpected places today?
Remulon.